And then there was Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton. This was the Trainwreck segment of the night on Friday. We had the split screen interview a couple of weeks ago via satellite, right? We had Charlotte on one side of the screen, Tiffany on the other. It was not a good night for Tiffany. Charlotte talked over her. She just completely demolished her in that promo. Tiffany did not come out of that looking good at all. And so she really needed a comeback here. But this is the first time that we had them one-on-one physically in the ring together for a segment like this. And they had Wade Barrett in the ring to moderate. It was less a matter of him moderating and more a matter of having somebody in there who could physically get in between them, because there were a couple of times where Charlotte got close to Tiffany as she was speaking, and Wade had to step in between them as if to remind Charlotte to like back up a little bit. But he gave her the first question. He asked Charlotte, give a little more depth as to why you chose Tiffany as your WrestleMania opponent, and do you still feel like that was a wise choice? And Charlotte said Tiffany was begging, and she's the gift that keeps on giving. Tiffany wanted a moment, and Charlotte hadn't done any charity work lately, so she gave her her moment. And yes, she did make the right choice. Tiffany asked if she was done. Are you done? Did you get your woo in? Charlotte's biggest competitor, she said, had been the fans. And no matter how long you've been out for, that's a battle that you will never win. Charlotte likes to act like nothing gets to her, but then she's out here crying on some talk show, and she's referring to the Sherry Shepherd show. Charlotte went on there and did a segment. I don't know how many people in the crowd would have even known about this, but that's what that was in reference to. So she says, which one is it? And the saddest part about all this, no matter how many titles that you win, you will always come second to your daddy, Ric Flair. And at WrestleMania, you're going to come second to Tiffany Stratton. So Charlotte said Tiffany just regurgitated what all of her opponents have said about her over the last 10 years. And at this point in the promo, the crowd in Chicago were actively trying to drown this woman out with boos, right? The booing was so intense that she had to stop her promo. And then she tried to speak again. And she said, it doesn't matter if Tiffany, and then she got cut off again by the loud booing. And Tiffany goes, what's the matter, Charlotte? Cat got your tongue? And Charlotte said, she's got like this smile on her face. It's almost like a coping mechanism where she'll smile, but it's like that meme of like the smiling like troll face or whatever, but then like it's like a mask and underneath you can see them crying. Like I feel like that's what it is. And Charlotte's got this big smile on her face. And she said, no, they're booing so loud. And they continue to boo. She goes, here's the thing. And the booing just got to her so much that she gave up. And she said, Tiffany, you can go ahead and have the last word. Which, this is Charlotte Flair. So you knew that in the end, of course, Tiffany wasn't going to be allowed to have the last word. But she said, you go ahead and have the last word. This woman was legitimately rattled by the reaction, and she just decided to give the floor to her opponent like she didn't know how to respond to any of this. And Tiffany said that at 25 years old, what was Charlotte doing? Trying to become a volleyball player, drinking in your daddy's basement. And at the age of 25, I'm walking into WrestleMania as the WWE Women's Champion. You say this is just another match to you? Seems I've gotten to you, Charlotte. And your WrestleMania record may be 4-3, and you may be the queen inside the ring, but outside the ring, and she stumbled over her words a little bit here, but she said outside the ring, you ain't the queen of shit, right? That was going to be like the big line there, and they censored it, but Charlotte stepped all over her punchline by talking over her. Like right as she was getting to the end of the insult, Charlotte just started talking over her. And then the worst part about the entire thing, Charlotte begins squawking like a bird. And she said that Tiffany sounded squeaky. And she starts, I don't even know how to describe the noises that she was making, like mocking her. And then she acted like she couldn't hear her. Again, this felt like a total coping mechanism from this woman. And Tiffany said for 16 more days, Charlotte gets to call herself WWE's least favorite Nepo baby, which is the second Nepo baby reference on TV this week. John Cena used the same line against Cody on Monday. And Charlotte corrected her and said, Nepo Queen. But then Charlotte also referred to herself as the number one Nepo baby. So which is it? Tiffany said that when she beats her at WrestleMania, when it's all said and done, Charlotte is going to be just like you are outside of the ring alone. What's that record? 0 for 3? Referring to her number of failed marriages. And then Tiffany wooed, dropped the mic, and rolled out of the ring as quickly as possible. And Charlotte, who said that she was going to give Tiffany the last word, couldn't help herself and told her, hey, Tiffany, is that why Kaiser is in my DMs? Because, of course, she had to get the last word in because that's just the way it is. And it was just so like thrown out there. Like there's no way that was obviously planned. She was gotten to. She was bothered by what Tiffany said, and the reaction of the crowd didn't help. And she felt like I have to throw something out there. So, hey, I got Kaiser in my DM. She might have Kaiser in her DMs. She might have, Bert Kaiser, maybe Matthew Kaiser. I'm sure there may well be multiple men by the name of Kaiser in her DMs. I'm sure that Ludwig is not one of them. Now, immediately after this segment was over, WrestleVotes tweeted, Charlotte and Tiffany said very little of what was in the rundown for them. Off script quite a bit. Of course. Charlotte got thrown off by the fans booing her midway through and not letting her speak, and she didn't know how to handle it. Mike Johnson had this report on PW Insider. The SmackDown face-off with Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton went well off the planned back and forth verbiage. Towards the end of the segment, there were references made by Stratton about Flair being alone and 0 for 3 outside of the ring, which was an allusion to her divorces, followed by Flair asking why Stratton's significant other, Ludwig Kaiser, was in Flair's DMs. The belief among those we've spoken with this morning is that Stratton fired away on Flair in retaliation for how Flair ate her up on a previous face-to-face segment. Some that we spoke with felt Stratton stood up for herself in a way that put the spotlight back on her, and in front of a Chicago crowd that was sincerely pro-Stratton, while others felt that the segment going awry towards the end did not help anybody. Several we spoke to also noted that Flair was obviously thrown by the crowd, which allowed Stratton's shots to hit even harder. Flair's final comment about Kaiser came after Stratton had already rolled out of the ring and began exiting the arena. One source referred to it as coming off like a flailing shot from a boxer who didn't realize they were KO'd, and that Flair was obviously gotten to. Several of the comments made were cut from WWE's YouTube highlights of the segment, which is true, by the way, but USA Network has their own YouTube channel, and they have the full segment up uncensored and unedited, at least for now, if you want to go check out what all the hubbub is about. Now, Dave Meltzer had this write-up about it. What we were directly told is that the situation has been brewing, and those close to the situation said that neither was in the right, but that Flair is taking most of the heat. The Chicago crowd booed Flair heavily from the start, and even more as it continued. Stratton got a mixed reaction at first with light Tiffy time chants, but the crowd got more behind her as the segment went on. It appeared they got more behind her because they hated Flair more so than they were really behind Stratton, who didn't really come across like a babyface either. We do know the problems were early, and it wasn't the 0 for 3 marriage line that caused them. If it was the 0 for 3 line that was the first that went off script, the heat would have been more on Stratton. There was a part in the promo earlier where Wade Barrett tried to get in between them that did not appear planned and may have been his sense to keep them apart. Flair responded by saying Ludwig Kaiser is in her DMs, which just seemed really weird, particularly calling him Kaiser, which is a stage name, like it was part of an angle. It should be noted that everybody seems to be told that it was a segment that fell apart, exactly the way it appeared. One person there did say that it's during WrestleMania season, so you can't say 100% either way. But we were told from someone close to it that Flair went off script first, and the lines from her standpoint, were retaliation. Her rolling out of the ring like a heel was to avoid Stratton now. Her rolling out of the ring like a heel was to avoid getting worse, and a defense mechanism. This would be consistent with Flair having more heat on her than Stratton, according to one person very close to the situation, who would not provide any specific details past that, and that there was heat on both, and neither was the good guy. If it was all part of some elaborate work to make it feel real and to garner attention, it certainly accomplished the latter of the two, because people have been talking about it now for the past 2 days. Do I think it was a work? Absolutely not. And whether it is or it isn't, it was a train wreck either way. Now, some people like to watch train wrecks, right? It's like the cars that rubberneck to look at the car crash on the highway. I think this feud sucks. And every time these two get together, it's very awkward and it's very uncomfortable, and not in a way that is that I find entertaining. Maybe you do. It's awkward and uncomfortable in a way that I don't find entertaining, and it certainly doesn't make me any more interested in seeing them wrestle at WrestleMania. It just makes for bad television. And it's not the first time that Charlotte Flair has been involved in an awkward segment on television. Need I remind you of the belt swap with Becky Lynch? And there was legitimate heat between those two as well. To the point where, if you remember, they got into a shouting match when they got to the back, and Charlotte had to be escorted out of the building. Charlotte really does think that she is the queen bee. It's not just a gimmick on TV. And when she feels threatened, or when things don't go her way, you end up with something like what we saw on Friday. She was clearly rattled by the crowd reaction. We see people like Dominic Mysterio or The New Day after their heel turn. They get nuclear heat where you can barely hear them. The boos are so loud. It's the sort of thing that, like, as a heel, you would kill for a reaction like that. Now, with Dominic, I think it's more a case of, honestly, people having fun booing him. See, the thing with Dominic Mysterio heat, it's not go-away heat. Like, they're having fun booing him. And he's very good in his role. With Charlotte, it's more, and this was certainly the case on Friday, it's more, we don't like you, and we want you out of the ring and off our TV. And she just doesn't react well to it. She doesn't know how to handle it. You would think, for as long as she has been doing this now, 10 years on the main roster, and for being the daughter of Ric Flair, one of the greatest promos in the history of the business, a man who knew how to manipulate a crowd like very few others, how to master an audience. It's almost impressive how shockingly bad she is at it. You know, I don't know why something like that would get to her as much as it did, but that's what happened. And honestly, I really think it goes back to that first promo on Raw after she won the Royal Rumble, when she was spilling her guts to the fans about her injury and not knowing if she would ever return, and the people booed her. She wasn't expecting it. And it just feels like she's been having a hard time adapting to that ever since. For Tiffany, I mean, look, if Tiffany also went off script here and threw some shots at her in retaliation for what Charlotte did to her, then good for her. I've criticized her promos and her delivery before. Tiffany Stratton has not evolved as a character. She has not evolved her promos. She has not evolved her delivery. Now she's a babyface. Before she was a heel. Nothing has changed. And her promos are just not that great. And she got dressed down very badly by Charlotte in that split screen. But she was a lot better here. And that's the nicest thing that I could say about any of this. I only hope that their in-ring chemistry is better than their chemistry on the microphone, because they have none.